Now, one of the questions I've had asked the most, and one of the things that people have wanted to know over the past almost 30 years now that I've been doing this, is how to tell if a motor's bad. I mean, that could be egg on your face. You can look like a fool if you tell your boss or you tell somebody that, yeah, that motor's bad, let's go ahead and change it. They go through the expenses of changing it, and in the end, the motor's still good. And then it ends up being something else. So one of the things that we're going to check is if your windings are shorted to ground. In other words, if you have a short, or if the windings are shorted to each other, or if the windings are open. These are the three most common faults we have with a motor. So we'll briefly go through that. And if it's something that interests you, if it's something that sparks more curiosity, we can follow up. We're going to use a 3-phase 40-volt AC motor just because it's one of the most common ones out there in the industrial field. If you have another type of motor, then that'll be for another video. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to work on this type of motor. With this type of motor, we're going to have 3 leads, which are commonly called T1, T2, and T3. Those 3 leads are the outside world connection. The internal to the motor, we probably have 6 windings, which have a variation of connections. But we're going to worry about the 3 leads coming out, being connected to either a drive or a contactor or a motor starter. So the first thing we're going to check is whether the leads are shorted to ground. In this case, we're going to use a common multimeter, a good quality multimeter. A Fluke is a good quality multimeter. And we're going to set the dial to ohms or resistance. Once we do that, then we get our 2 leads, which is commonly a black and a red lead, and we're going to make sure that we're going to test between T1, T2, and T3, and we're going to test each one to ground. So when we do this, we want to make sure that we don't touch anything else. We're only touching the lead to ground, a verified ground, and we're going to the readings between T1 to ground, T2 to ground, and T3 to ground all should read infinite. So if you take a reading and it's 0, it's not good. 0 means short. You need it to be infinite. 0 is bad, as is any other reading. The next thing we want to check is if the windings inside the motor, internal in the motor, are shorted together or if they're open. Again, we're going to use a basic multimeter set to resistance or ohms, and we should get the following results. So making sure we unwire the motor so we don't get any other resistance in the circuit, we're going to measure the resistance between the T leads. We want to make sure we get every combination of the 3. So we're going to do, first we're going to do T1 to T2, and let's just say on a 3/4 horse motor, we end up getting 25 ohms. Your resistance is going to vary, but what we want here is when we measure all 3 of the sets, right? All 3 of the sets here, we all get a really close reading at the end. So if between T1 and T2 you measure 25 ohms, between T1 and T3 we want to see the same 25 ohms. Between T2 and T3 we want the same 25 ohms. If we don't have a balanced reading, then there's something wrong with the windings. We're going to also measure between, so if we get, let's say, nothing, right? That means it's open. And if we get something other than an even between each other, then we're also going to have problems that could be shorted together. You might get 3 or 1. Okay, that's also going to be bad. And I should have said this sooner or at the beginning, but always remember safety first. Always lock out and tag out your motor. You don't want somebody turning it on while you have the exposed leads in your hands. So for more information and more tips and how-tos, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and visit our website, theautomagicians.com.